Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Andrea, for your presentation. Thank you, Niels. So my name is Beatrice. As Niels said before, I work here at the Consumption and Production Unit at the UNEP, and I lead the work around consumer information and eco-labeling. And Niels and we are going to split this presentation about the guidelines today, so that you don't get too bored with the same tone of voice all the way, especially because it's Friday and everybody wants to just have some fun. So I'm going to start talking about how we developed these guidelines for providing product sustainability information. It was an effort done within the Consumer Information Program in a multi-stakeholder consultation process that took us more or less 2 years. This work was led by UNEP together with ITC. And so the objectives so the idea was to have a set of common grounds of minimum requirements, like to level the playing field around consumer information of product sustainability. And so we spoke with more than 100 experts and people that contribute to this work. And it's a very broad tool that can be applied to any kinds of communications, as I'm going to mention afterwards. So the guidelines, they contribute to the achievement of SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production, especially target 12.8, that is to ensure that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development and lifestyles in harmony with nature. So also it's to another objective of the guidelines is to improve the reliability of consumer information for sustainable consumption through international consensus. So that's what we try to achieve when we engaged that many experts in developing this work. So as I said, we set a common ground of minimum requirements to remove potential for greenwashing, and we actively encourage organizations to take leadership and communicate quality, useful information to the consumers. Next slide, please. The target audience of the guidelines. The first target audience is mainly the information providers. So businesses, private sector, marketing and advertising professionals, the one that actually provide information for the consumers. And the consumers here, for us, it's either individual consumers, but it can also be business as consumers and governments as consumers. So for the private sector and for the marketing professionals, the objective is to apply the guidelines for the development of product sustainability information. Another audience that we target is labeling and voluntary sustainability standard schemes and governments to help them compare and adapt upcoming product sustainability information schemes and policies to the guidelines. And third, we have trade unions, consumer, environmental, and other civil society organizations and market surveillance authorities to check the quality of the product sustainability information in the market, comparing to the guidelines. So these would be the three main audience of the guidelines. As I said, it's a very broad tool that can be applied in different ways, in all sectors, in all kinds of for all kinds of companies, small or big companies. Next slide, please. So, what kind of information do the guidelines cover? All tools and systems that seek to guide consumers to make more sustainable choices on goods and services. So, for examples, eco-labels, product declarations, communicating with consumers on footprinting, marketing claims, internal communication, all ways of communicating with consumers on environmental, social, and economic issues connected to products. So this is the main, this is what kind of information can be checked vis-a-vis the guidelines. Next slide, please. So when developing the guidelines in this long and multi-stakeholder process that I mentioned to you, we came about two ways of actually taking the information out. So we developed a mindset and 10 principles. The mindset is what you should have in mind before creating your communication, before you actually in the whole system of your production, but also before creating your communication. The first mindset is life cycle thinking, is to apply life cycle thinking, it's not mandatory that you do a life cycle assessment, but at least to apply a life cycle thinking while developing your communication. The second mindset is to apply the hotspots analysis approach. So based on the life cycle thinking is to identify the most impactful or relevant states, activities, material, and energy flows within a product's life cycle to actually see where the impacts are more relevant and where you should be working or where you should be communicating the good performance of your product. And the third mindset is to mainstream in sustainability, is to integrate the product-related sustainability claim into an entire decision-making process and management process of your business. So here we try to incentivize the companies that sometimes have one product that they call it sustainable to actually mainstream sustainability to the whole production and management systems. Now I will hand over to Niels, who is going to talk to you about the 10 principles.
Yeah, thank you, Beatrice. So yeah, as Beatrice mentioned, the guidelines are built around 10 principles for providing effective, trustworthy sustainability claims about products. And as she mentioned, the working group decided early on that the aim should be to have minimum requirements to avoid greenwashing, but also to encourage continuous improvement and inspire sustainability leadership. Therefore, there are two sets of 5 principles each in the guidelines, fundamental ones that must be followed and aspirational ones that should be met over time. And I will start by talking you through the 5 fundamental principles that for providing product sustainability information, and these are reliability, transparency, relevance, accessibility, and clarity. The first principle is reliability. This principle asks for the information that is communicated to have a reliable and scientific basis. Claims need to be truthful and based on an accepted methodology and substantiated evidence. So the supporting methods and standards must be consistent with the claim that is being made, and this doesn't necessarily need to be built on third-party certification schemes, but it should have independent assurance or endorsement by scientific institutions or governments. As an example, a t-shirt that is organic could be substantiated with an accepted standard for organic cotton, such as the Global Organic Textile Standard. The second principle of relevance aims to ensure that all significant sustainability aspects are covered. And the aim is to highlight product characteristics or innovations that really make a difference to the overall sustainability performance of the product. So the claim should be about an integral aspect of the product, for example, the processes, materials, or impacts involved, and go beyond the legal requirements. The claim should also not highlight one positive aspect to mask other, maybe more important sustainability aspects where the product performs poorly in its sustainability. This is known as burden shifting and should definitely be avoided. For instance, to say that a mattress is ozone friendly is irrelevant because CFCs are banned internationally and the impact on the ozone layer is not a hotspot for mattresses. The third principle is clarity. Clarity is about delivering a clear and easy to understand message that provides a direct link between the claim and the product. It should help consumers understand their role in improving product performance and reduce the impact of their consumption. A nice example we have here is the recycling label from the on-pack recycling label in the UK. You can see it on the picture on the left. It gives detailed information on which parts of the packaging are recyclable while referring to available recycling infrastructure, or encouraging the consumer to check the recycling options. And the action for the consumer is therefore very clear. It's to recycle those parts of the packaging that can be recycled, check about others, and not try to recycle parts that cannot be recycled currently. Clarity also means to avoid vague and ambiguous and broad claims about general sustainability benefits, and terms such as green, eco, or natural, unless they come with a known standard or label or clear definition and more information on what is meant by the term. And it is also important to clearly state the limits of the claim, so not to mislead the consumer that an entire product is sustainable if only certain aspects are addressed. The fourth principle is transparency. While it's not necessary, feasible, or desirable to provide all information underlying sustainability claims to the consumer at point of sale, because that would be confusing and overwhelming for the consumer to process. Consumers who want to know more need to be able to find out how the claim was generated and by whom. The information must be made publicly available to consumers so they can evaluate for themselves the underlying methodology behind the claims. And competent bodies must also get access to relevant confidential information to verify the claim. Generally, we think that actually sustainability information shouldn't be confidential in the first place. But if there's a case for that, then it needs to be opened up to competent bodies at least to assess that the claims are truthful. Providing a sustainability claim without publishing any additional proof or information to support it is insufficient, and lack of transparency in the end also undermines the credibility and the consumer trust in the information provided. The final fundamental principle is accessibility. Accessibility requires information to be clearly visible for consumers and to be provided where and when it is useful. Often the best place is on the product or its packaging, ideally in a prominent position so that the consumer can see it right away. For instance, if the major sustainability impact of a product is not in its process or qualities, but depends on the correct use of the product, then the consumer must have that information when they actually use the product to adopt the right behavior and achieve the sustainability benefit advertised. QR codes can also be a good option to provide additional information or instructions for sustainable use, because the space on pack can sometimes be limited. And we see that now more and more often in the market as well. Now I come to the aspirational principles, and the aim of the aspirational principle is to go beyond the fundamental principles and encourage continuous improvement in the communication to consumers. They're not compulsory, but should be aspired to in the long term. And however, the fundamental principle must not be abandoned and or replaced by the aspirational principles. So the fundamental ones should always be the basis, and then you can build on that with the aspirational principles. The idea is not only to communicate to consumers, but also engage and interact with them and better include them in the consumption process and understand their information needs regarding product sustainability. So here we have, again, 5 principles, and the first one is the 3 dimensions of sustainability. This is about addressing all 3 dimensions of sustainability: environmental stewardship, social inclusiveness, and economic viability. The focus should again be on the most relevant aspects for each product while avoiding burden shifting between the dimensions. In practice, this is often quite complex to adequately address all 3 dimensions. This is also why we consider it as an aspirational principle. But there is a good example, for example, the fair trade tourism certification. And there's also a possibility for certification schemes or labels that only address one or two dimensions to be combined with another scheme or label so that they cover all three dimensions complementarily. A common example here is a fair trade certification for social and economic criteria, and then adding an organic certification for the environmental criteria of a product. The second aspirational principle is behavior change and longer-term impact. This principle aims to resolve the attitude-behavior or value-action gap. So by using behavioral insights, sustainability claims should go beyond simply informing consumers towards encouraging action that helps reduce the impacts of consumption, either through the purchase directly or through use, reuse, or disposal of products in a more sustainable manner. And it is important to build a longer-term relationship with consumers to sustain this behavior change in the long term, monitor the impacts, and further educate consumers in the process on sustainability. One example is the successful Turn to 30 campaign by Ariel, when they encourage consumers to wash at lower temperatures by still having the same effect. And there's also a relevant concept in behavioral science called nudging, which is gaining more and more attraction at the moment. And the aim is to guide people's behavior in a positive way without restricting their choice. The third aspirational principle is multi-channel and innovative approach. And this principle encourages the use of multiple channels and the combination of different approaches to provide consumers with product sustainability information. Creative ideas and entertaining ways to present information and highlight sustainability issues can help raise attention and complement the fact-based presentation of relevant information at product level without overloading the consumer. So social media is also a good source here, or as an example, there was a campaign by Intermarché, a French retailer, called Inglorious Fruits and Vegetables. So they used marketing, advertising, social media, store rebrands, and other tools to inform consumers about food waste and convince them that there's no need to avoid non-standardized fruits and vegetables. So like this grotesque apple on the picture. And they also had like activities of giving discounts for these kind of fruits and vegetables, or use them to produce juices and soups. So this is one example of how to be a bit more innovative and inform consumers about the sustainability issue, and also encourage them to change their behavior. And the fourth principle is collaboration. So this is about engaging stakeholders in developing sustainability claims and communicating them to consumers by letting other actors participate. The public acceptance, credibility, and trust can be increased, and also a wider audience can be reached by using the network of your partners. And using an inclusive language can also help make consumers feel part of a movement. And there's a lot of evidence and research that social cohesion is a strong factor in reinforcing behavior change across society. So by collaborating with others, you can kind of leverage that and encourage more sustainable consumption behavior. And this kind of stakeholder engagement should be a continuous effort to also enable the evaluation and adaptation of the sustainability communication over time. I think for smaller organizations, it's not always easy to reach out to other stakeholders or actors. But I think that's also where the One Planet Network can be a good way to connect interested organizations, or help people who make sustainability claims reach other interested organizations and work together to improve their communication of sustainability information. So we, if anyone is interested, we are happy to assist, or you can reach out to us. The last principle, the last aspirational principle is comparability. This principle intends to help consumers in their decision making by being able to compare similar products in their sustainability performance and to then choose the better option. This is very helpful and often demanded by consumers, but also unfortunately quite complex to implement. Comparative advertising, for example, is sometimes strictly regulated, and claim providers must also make sure they carefully assess the methodology, evidence, and legal basis for their comparisons. I mean, quite often you simply don't have the relevant data to compare two products on their sustainability performance accurately. So it is, if one does that, it is recommended to follow existing guidance or get involved in joint approaches to develop comparability criteria and adhere to existing benchmarks. One example that is proven quite effective is the energy class rating from the European Union. And this is a relative rating scheme, and that helps consumers compare appliances with a similar product class on their energy efficiency, and is based on a credible system defined and regulated by the EU. So there you have like a few facts that can help consumers assess the sustainability performance of the product and compare it to other products in the same range. And now I hand over to Beatrice again to present our experiences from the road testing exercise of the guidelines when we worked with other organizations to apply the 10 principles to their sustainability communication.
Okay. Thank you, Niels. So, yes, after we launched the guidelines, and we decided to run what we call it a road testing exercise to work with companies and standard setters organizations to check if the first, if the principles were applicable to real life claims, and second, to gather their feedback on what are the challenges or what are the strengths of the principles. So we have done this process for about 1 year, and this process was supported by the those institutions, the ministry, the French Ministry of Ecological Transition and Ecological Transition and Solidarity, and the German Ministry of Environment. So we did this process and we launched this report. Oh, yeah, next slide, please. And we launched the report of the road testing of the guidelines. So after doing this exercise, we produced a report with the main findings of the road test, and also we produced a series of case studies that I'm going to talk to you about later on. So we launched the report in March 2019 during the United Nations Environmental Assembly in Kenya, and where we launched and presented the key results of this exercise. Next slide, please. So with the road testing exercise, as I mentioned, we wanted to understand how feasible it is to apply the guidelines, including over different sectors, different size of companies and types of claims, to identify where the most challenges lie for future work on product sustainability information, and also to collect good practice case studies and lessons learned in different regions and sectors. So we target companies and standard setting organizations. Next slide, please. So we worked with 28 organizations. We we helped them assess 31 different claims, and those are the organizations. You can see that you have, we managed to have road testers from all regions, all sizes of companies. So we have like big companies, we also have small companies, small SMEs. We have standard setters that are known worldwide, that have like a broad range of that covers a broad range of topics, others standards that cover only very limited one subject. So we really at the end we managed to work with a really broad sample of road testers. Next slide, please. So the general results that is was that the principles, they have overall pertinence on the two categories, so the fundamental and the aspirational. So this the pertinence was confirmed. That the 10 principles are easy to understand and have the potential to help organizations to improve the communications tools. And also the application of the guidelines can indeed make claims more objective, consistent, and clear for consumers. So all the participants of the road testing exercise, they agree that as applying the guidelines, the claims can be actually improved. So with this, we were very happy with the general results, because they really confirmed that the way the guidelines were developed and the principles, they are actually achieving the expected results. So the challenges and the strengths, they can in applying the guidelines, they can differ from depending on the type of organization and the claims. And then I will give you some examples later. Next slide, please. So, for example, the standard setters, they say that Principle 7, behavior change and longer term impacts, is the hardest to apply because they usually do not have direct interaction with individual and consumers. Normally, the standard setters, they communicate directly with the business that are their clients. So they say to promote behavior change and long-term impact is one of the hardest principles to apply. And the other one that was mentioned is Principle 6, the 3 dimensions of sustainability, is hard to apply for single-use certification schemes because the overall sustainability is not claimed. So this is especially true for this type 1, we call it type 1 like standards, where they focus on one aspect of sustainability. It can be like the source of the wood. It can be social aspects like the Rainforest Alliance. So this type of standards, they tend to find hard to comply to apply the Principle 6 of the 3 dimensions of sustainability. As of the companies, they found more difficult to assess the questions around the rigor and credibility. So Principle 1, reliability, and Principle 2, relevance, were the hardest ones for the companies, because they were sometimes they don't know the science behind the data, so they found that it's a little bit tricky to apply Principles 1 and 2 or to understand what is behind the claim. For SMEs, they faced the greatest challenge when applying Principle 8, multi-channel and innovative approach, and Principle 9, collaboration, because it demands additional resources and planning to actually use different types of communication and also to engage multiple stakeholders in the development of the claim. So for SMEs, those are the greatest challenges. Next slide, please. The main challenge that all institutions mention were the availability of space on PAC. So this it does not depend if it's a company or if it's a standard setter. They all agree that those challenges are very important to be addressed. So availability of space on PAC, because normally you have when you're conveying information about product sustainability, you have to compete with other messages concerning safety, nutrition, health, and performance of the product, and also compete with the sometimes when we are talking about labels, to compete with the brand of the product itself. The other challenge that was mentioned by all road testers was the complexity of sustainability information. So they acknowledged the difficulty in communicating technical terms to the general public without oversaturating or confusing the consumers. And the third one is the lack of harmonized approach. So this is especially true among the standard setters. So collaboration should be increased between standard setting organizations and the brands to have a consumer-oriented approach, as well as an extra effort to work towards greater harmonization between the various standards schemes. So those are the main challenges that were broadly mentioned during the road test. The next slide, please. So how to further progress in the field? We found out that some very actionable targets can be came out of this exercise that we can work to actually progress further in the product sustainability information field. So provide additional guidance on implementation of certain approaches and principles, because some of the road testers, they had problems understanding the meaning of some principles. So to provide additional guidance, provide further instructions on how the guidelines can be applied by different types of organizations and claims. So here we say that we develop some trainings or some training material that can be more targeted to different types of organizations and claims. So maybe have training materials that are sectorial, developed by sectors or by types of claims, targeting marketing organizations, for example. Also to enhance collaborations and create synergies. And here is the active role that the consumer information program and also the sustainable lifestyles program can play to help enhance collaboration and create synergies around product sustainability information, and to work on policy level. So here we are step by step starting to work with the national organizations in charge of consumer protection and consumers affairs, to work on policy level, to have the countries developing their national policies, taking the guidelines and the 10 principles more specifically into consideration. The next slide, please. So yeah, so I have already mentioned this. So yeah, these are some of testimonies of some of the road testers. And now, so as I mentioned, we after doing the road test, we collected some case studies, and I am going to present one of the case studies for you now. The case study developed with DNA Merge. So all this information is available in the One Planet Network website. We have launched, as of now, I believe, 22 case studies of the road testing exercise. So next slide, please. So, so the way we did is that we developed the case studies telling the story of how the company, of how the label, they assessed every one of the principles. I am not going to talk to you about all the assessments. I'm just going to highlight some of them to illustrate what Niels already presented about the principles in theory. So DNA Merge sells organic T-shirts sold by a self-organized social work cooperative in Croatia. It's a German company. Its main sustainability claim is made with dignity, worn with attitude, referring to the workers who sew the T-shirts and who work under conditions of mutual respect, equality, and inclusion. So the main the main attribute, sustainability attribute that they work with is the social aspects of sustainability. The company tracks all steps involved in the creation of the t-shirts, and they take steps towards a more sustainable garment industry. And being the company's sustainability claim part of the entire decision-making and management process of the brand. So this is, so next slide, please. So regarding the principle of reliability, I would like to mention that the parts of the t-shirt manufacturing process are verified to external standards. So this makes the methodology and these standards makes the claim reliable. The second one, on relevance, the subject of the claim is a major driver of the socioeconomic sustainability performance of the product. So it's a hotspot of the product. So it's integral into the way the product is produced. So this is how they address the principle of relevance. The next one. As of clarity, the message about the way the t-shirts are produced, made with dignity, is clear and refers to good social conditions for workers. And also the second half of the claim, word with attitude, is clear regarding the consumer use stage and also how the consumer role in making the, in this case, the fashion more sustainable. The next slide, next principle. Regarding transparency, so the DNA merge claim provides information on the supply chain, including names and locations of partners and accredited organization, and is made available on the website. So it's very transparent. Next one. On the accessibility principle, all the information is accessible through on pack in print on the neck area of each t-shirt as the picture shows, in points of sales through the use of hang tags and postcards. It's also available in social media, Facebook and Instagram, websites and leaflets. So this is how they actually make it very accessible to the consumer. Next one. The sustainability dimensions, as I mentioned, they focus mainly on the social and economic dimensions of the sustainability of the product. Although other claims made on the same product also address the environmental, because sometimes they use organic cotton, as it says here, so they can also address the environmental dimension of sustainability. But their focus is on the social, the well-being of the product makers, and also the economic dimensions, because they make sure that they are well paid and they are treated with fairness. So as the company expands, they are addressing the environmental dimension. Addressing the environmental dimension will become more of a challenge because of the source of the original cotton. The behavior. So now about the principles, the aspirational principles about behavior change and long-term impact. This claim that was assessed by DNA Merge inspires change through an inclusive language when it says worn with attitude. Also, the social conditions of production are important to DNA Merge supporters, so it also engage the consumers that are already aware of the sustainability and social issues. And the biggest challenge with this principle will be the strategic monitoring of changes in the behavior of partners and consumers, considering the DNA Merge is still a small social startup. So even with the they try to inspire the behavior change, but they actually don't monitor the actual change in behavior. But this is a very it's a small company, and this is a challenge even for big companies to actually try to monitor the change in behavior. Next slide. So about multi-channel and innovative approach, consumers can call or write to the company and interact on social media. DNA Merge plans to organize events to bring consumers together and provide a campaign builder page where they will be able to plan and customize their own fair t-shirt campaigns. So it's very, it uses a very innovative approach to talk to the consumer. Next one. The collaboration, so DNA Merge is a startup with one product, so it's just about the t-shirt, and as such it did not involve many stakeholders in the development of the claim. However, the stakeholders are partners relevant to the production of the t-shirts were part of the process of the claim creation. Next slide. So this illustrates what, sorry, can you come back? It illustrates one of the general outcomes of the road testing is that collaboration is normally very challenging for small and medium enterprises. The next one. So comparability. This principle is about to allow product comparisons for by the consumers, but the DNA Merge claim opted for not addressing this aspect. Next one. So yeah, with this, I finished my presentation about these case studies. I invite all of you to go to our webpage and take a look at the other case studies that were developed. As I mentioned, we have like 22 of them, and they all follow more or less the same structure as I presented here. We go step by step, describing how the claim assessed addresses each of the 10 principles. Now I will hand back to Niels, who will talk about the tools that we have at your disposal.
Yeah, as Beatrice mentioned, thank you. All the information is available on our One Planet Network program website. So we have put together a product sustainability information hub. It's linked on our main page, and this collates all the information around the guidelines and the road testing and so on. So you can find the guidelines report. The document is available in English, German, and Spanish at the moment, and we should have a Chinese translation coming out soon. And if we have budget, we might actually add further languages along the line to help with the national implementation and rolling it out in different countries. You can also find our report Ready to Drive the Market that Beatrice presented the findings on from our road testing experience in the past year, and this one is only available in English at the moment. Then you also have the 22 case study reports. These are usually like 3 to 4 pages long and give a good overview of the organization that what's involved as a road tester and how they apply the 10 principles to their sustainability claim. Then we also have a trainers toolkit, which helps partners deliver training workshops on the guidelines. So if you're interested in hosting a guidelines workshop yourself, then you can use these toolkits to be trained, and we can also help you with that. And finally, we have also a self-assessment tool that is available online that you can use to self-assess and improve the way you're communicating product sustainability information to consumers through labels, claims, standards, or product declarations. This is again the link. And again, on the self-assessment tool, this is how it looks like. It's here's the link directly to this tool. And if you represent an organization that communicates sustainability information, we really invite you to try out our self-assessment tool and would like to hear your feedback. And we will also share the presentation and the recording with you afterwards. and have now reached the end of our presentation, and I'm now happy to open the floor for a discussion. So please send us your questions or comments, or raise a hand and I can unmute you so you can ask your question directly. We'll just see if we have any questions so far.
While this is Andrea, while you're checking for other questions, maybe I could just come in with a quick one. We'll see. You have talked about, I mean, policy and moving this over to influencing national policies. And I'm wondering if there's been any engagement with any countries on this, and if there's any kind of shift or interest in moving from guidelines over to requirements for some of these for some of these guidelines or points. How was that?
So
yeah, maybe Beatrice.
Yeah. Yes, I can try to address. Actually, when I mentioned in my presentation that we should talk to try to align national policies with the guidelines, this is what actually we aim at, is that to make the principles mandatory in a way in the countries. But this is a very long process that we are now just trying to start talking to governments and try to address this. We know that it's actually we one of the things that we are doing this next year into 2020 is to do an assessment on how many countries have mandatory or voluntary policies around product sustainability information. And as of now, we know very little of them, very scattered mandatory regulation on product sustainability information. But we are planning to do this assessment next year as a first step on how to work with governments more in trying to align national policies with the guidelines. I hope I responded.
Absolutely. Yes, very interesting. Thank you, Beatrice. I'll be hooking up with you later.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions or raised hands at the moment.
I do. Sorry, I'll just
sure.
come in again.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. This is really interesting as far as the behavioral change aspect of it, you know, comparing products and nudging towards that, you know, right decision given the information that is provided to the consumer to be able to make those decisions. And we were looking at that, and Beatrice was on the same nudging conference or workshop that I was at a couple, 2-3 weeks ago. And this is something that we're looking possibly as a working, nothing is decided yet, but possibly as a working group within the SLE program. I just want to kind of flag that also to those that are from the SLE program and even the MAC members that are on the call, looking to form a behavioral change or a nudging for sustainable lifestyles working group, which will be most likely led by the Swedish EPA, but this is nothing set in stone. So all interest is welcome. But I was just wondering also, I'd like to connect with you to see more information, especially on the comparing the products and the information that you have, and even to extend an invitation. We're going to have a workshop, most likely, also a teaser, nothing set in stone, the day before our MAC meeting on the 25th of February to discuss just that. So keep that in mind. Reach out to me, anyone on the call or within the Consumer Information Program as well, because this is something that we would like to look further at in promoting sustainable lifestyle decision making through nudging.
Oh, this is very interesting, Andrea. And what I would suggest is that maybe because in the Consumer Information Program before Niels arrived, that's why I'm speaking. I didn't, because we actually had a working group on, or I'm not sure if it was a working group or at least an initiative on behavior change. So maybe we could think about having a joint working group, because we already had a joint working group with Sustainable Public Procurement Program, and it works. So maybe this is something that we could explore further.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I think definitely. I mean, there's I think good interest in our side as well to work more on behavior change and nudging as well. And we actually have the AIM, the European Brands Association, in our MEC, who just recently had a nudging conference where they rewarded some companies for their nudging approaches.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's fantastic. So yes, so we will definitely hook up Beatrice and Niels and anyone on the call. If you're interested in finding out more information, then please contact me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe from my side, maybe one question for you, Andrea, as well. If you think that there would be any organizations in your network that might be interested in applying these guidelines, or how you see it as being useful.
I think this is definitely something, because it's so close to what we're doing within Sustainable Lifestyle Education Program. I mean, it is reaching out to consumers to influence and to change, the norm, so to speak. So this is something that I could even bring up at the next MAC meeting. I know this is 4 months away, so it goes quicker than you think.
Yeah.
And maybe we can approach it that way.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Maybe you could come to Stockholm and meet us.
Sure. Let's see if there's an opportunity. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sure.
Good.
Okay, I think if there are no further comments or questions from anyone, then we can also close the webinar a bit earlier today. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining and attending. And we will send out.
Thank you, Beatrice and Niels. Really, really good stuff. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for this opportunity, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have a nice weekend.
Yes, you too.
Yeah,
Bye,
have a
everyone.
good weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.